Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 173, with Cam, aka Cam Productions. And on that episode, he came on the podcast to talk about his introduction into content, into YouTubing, how he got into it, some of the struggles that he's had regarding sports, having injury, leading into some different paths, which ultimately led to content. Really great episode. Cam's a really great guy. I'd really appreciate it if you check that episode out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available on YouTube. If you search Jared Carroll or The Carroll Connection, should pop up right for you, and it'll be great. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So that brings me to today. I did have a guest scheduled for today, but unfortunately, they got sick at the last minute. We had to reschedule. Someone who has been on the podcast, I love them dearly. We will reschedule that for the future, and it's not a big issue. But I felt like I should record a podcast today, kind of to keep with the momentum that I have with the Carroll Connection and in the pursuit of episode 200. And I hadn't done a solo episode since episode, I believe it was 158, my birthday reflection back in November. So this was kind of long overdue. We're in March now, so I felt that it might be good to give a check-in for people who might enjoy my solos, who might enjoy hearing from me. And the concept for this episode kind of came to me recently, actually. The title of this episode is Your Pain Has a Purpose. And I heard a clip recently of George Janko and Candace Owens. Shout out to them for actually sitting down with one another, because they obviously, if you know content creators and those two specifically, have different opinions politically. And to see those type of creators come together and have a conversation is very important for the content space and for media. I think it's important for people that believe different things to come together and find common ground. And part of the clip that I'm going to play for you so you can hear it on the audio version is them talking about God and faith. And if you've listened to my podcast recently, I've gotten into a lot of different conversations about faith and God and religion and spirituality. And I think it's really important part of the conversation going forward as a society and for myself, honestly. Shout out to my brother, James Carroll III. Been on the podcast before. Go back and check that episode out. Me and him have been playing a lot of 2K together, and we've been talking about the concept a little bit about religion and God and his journey back to Jesus, to God, and his faith. And I found it really remarkable and really admirable that he's chosen this path for himself. And we talked a little bit about it and the idea of it, and giving kind of this renewed faith and belief in things going forward, and that God always has your back and doesn't put you in situations that you can't handle type of thing. And I felt like that's a good talking point. I feel like that really relates and resonates with kind of the things that I'm going through. I've gone through something recently in February that was probably one of the most traumatic, heaviest things that I've ever experienced in my life. And I've kind of been hesitant to talk about it. And I'm not going to discuss the details or what it actually had occurred on the podcast, because it's not appropriate. But I wanted to acknowledge just kind of how I feel. And I've been talking to a therapist a little bit and just trying to get things off my chest and process things. And this will lead into later the conversation about the benefits of therapy and the benefits of just kind of powering through certain things. And for me, I think it's important for me to kind of just say that, like, I'm struggling emotionally. I'm having a hard time processing what kind of happened. It's like you understand your trauma, but it's like a long term thing too, is trying to put it in perspective at how it affects your life, because we don't know until life progresses and how things unfold. You really don't know how trauma will continue to reoccur or how situations progress until they progress. Um, I think I've been able to handle what I've gone through pretty well considering the circumstances. And emotionally, I've been able to kind of keep moving forward, keep doing things. I'm still present in my relationship, present at work, present with my family, and I think that's really important in the gym as well. And especially my side project that hopefully I will get to you guys this summer or the end of the year, kind of working towards doing that. And I think that's also important to admit. But getting back to the point of this podcast, your pain has a purpose. I'm gonna play this clip for you from the George Janko podcast. I think it's the George Janko show, to be honest. My apologies for getting it wrong if I did. But I'm gonna play the whole clip through the microphone, and for you guys that are listening audibly or watching, I will turn the camera. You probably can't see it too well, but I'm just gonna allow it, and they're gonna discuss pain has a purpose.
Where you're at in your life, if you're uncomfortable, if you're mad, if you're upset, listen to what you're asking God for and realize that He's putting you through what you're praying for. So if you want to be great, know that you have to go through things that will make you great. You look how many obstacles I'm gonna have to put you through because you need to mentally prepare yourself. I can't just give it to you. The best thing that God can give you is wisdom. And if you ask anybody who's wise, how do you get wisdom? It's really by absorbing what you're going through. Everything. Even if you feel like you're at rock bottom, examine it. Like really see, how am I here? Why am I here? And now when God pulls me out, how can I tell my brothers and sisters to get out of there? Really open up your eyes and fear nothing but the Lord. If you fear nothing but the Lord, then everything else is just literally a game. Life is a game, and you're just building up.
And I was angry at God. I was like,
I'm gonna stop there for use, just so I don't get hopefully copyright stricken on the audio. But I wanted to play that clip because I felt like it was really important, because the value that they're talking about here is your pain has a purpose. And whether you're talking about God or the universe or source, Allah, whatever you believe in, um, they don't put you through things that you can't handle. And your pain has purpose. Sometimes you don't see that purpose right away. Sometimes you have to wait days, months, weeks, years until you're able to see the purpose of your pain. But you can handle anything that you're going through. And I think that's an important message for people to hear, and especially myself, to kind of accept that truth that everything bad that I've ever been through, I've come out the other side greater. And I think that's important to acknowledge for myself. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this podcast, was to talk about that specific thing, is powering through, getting through the thing. You can handle whatever God, universe, source puts you through. And it's to ultimately get you to what you want. If you're asking or believing or manifesting something in your life, you're going to get tested. You're going to have to do the things in order to get that certain thing that you want. And you don't just get it. You're going to be tested. You're going to be put through things. You're going to get pushed down into sometimes rock bottom. But it's on you to power through, to get through those things. It's up to no one else around you. No one's going to save you. No one's going to tell you how to feel. No one's going to tell you what to do. And I think that has been really powerful for me when I'm coping with some of the things that I'm coping with. Trying to process some of those things is, at the end of the day, we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep doing the thing. You can't just sulk and sit and cry and whine. Like, there's a place for that. It's important to process those things and get those feelings out, because stuck energy is stuck energy. You don't want to be keeping that inside forever. But you also don't want to cry about every single thing and never move on. And there was this podcast that I listened to recently with Joe Rogan, and forgive me for not remembering this woman's name. I'll kind of look at it as I'm talking, but she wrote a book called Bad Therapy, and she was it's Abigail Schreier. Love her or hate her, I think this podcast was really good, and they talked about the benefits and negatives of therapy. And as someone who represents mental health, who promotes mental health, who promotes therapy, I think there's a place for all of that. And what she talks about is like the over prescription of mental health, of therapy. And I'm kind of starting to see that in society where every little thing is a huge issue with some people and they just don't address it themselves. Like they need someone else to tell them that they're okay. And sometimes that's needed. And I think that's an important message to also state. But I think bad things happen and you have to accept bad things happen. Loss is a part of life. Losing is a part of life. Breakups are a part of life. Death is a part of life. Um, all these things are added into the human experience, just like the birth of your child, a marriage, getting a new dog, getting a new job, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, the highs and lows of life. I think all those experiences culminate the human experience, which is neither right or wrong, good or bad. But understanding that these things are a part of life are important when processing, I think, a lot of our traumas. Obviously, there's certain things that I highly recommend people go to therapy, they talk to a specialist and get some of that stuff out there. There's certain traumas that can really sit with you and are not healthy to ignore. And I have been through things where I feel like that was me, where I can't ignore those things and I've sought out help to go talk about those things. And I think that's really important to do, is to know when you're struggling and know when you need to reach outside, but also to know when you're good enough to keep moving forward as well. You don't want to keep revisiting and resulking and just thinking about yourself all the time, because if we're thinking about ourselves all the time, what is that striking? It's our ego. It's stroking our ego, I should say. And it's getting into that negative self-talk. It's like you're ruminating on these emotions and these feelings. And I don't think that's always positive and healthy, to be honest. I think it's healthy to go into those spaces, to go into like inside the mind, inside the heart, and figure out what we're feeling, figure out what we're thinking, but also to remember those thoughts, they're not ourselves. That's not you. Those are just a thought. Thoughts come and go. And I learned that in therapy a few years back. Shout out to my therapist back then, is to understand that a thought is a thought and we need to just let it pass. The metaphor that I was always painted was when we're looking at a river, think about the leaves flowing down the river. Those leaves are our thoughts. The thoughts go in and out. And you might have a leaf that keeps coming back, keeps rotating, but that leaf will go down the river eventually. You need to just let it go. And I think that's part of this your pain has a purpose message, is it's important to feel pain. Pain's an important emotion to feel. It's not a good emotion to feel, but it's an important emotion to feel because that pain teaches us stuff. Pain is the ultimate lesson. And also, pain can create purpose. There's so many great artists in this world that have created amazing music and art from their pain. I even think about this podcast in some way. Before I started, I felt lost. I felt depressed. I felt anxious. That pain helped me create something beautiful. My side project, I will talk about that at some later date this year. A lot of the stuff that birthed that was pain, was struggle, was what's next? What can I do? I feel like I'm lacking in some area. What can I do to challenge myself? That pain pushes you forward. Obviously, there is different thresholds for pain, and every single person is different. Understand that every single person is different. My trauma is different than your trauma. And I think Joe Rogan says this best on his podcast. And he said this recently on that podcast. The worst thing that you've ever been through is the worst thing that you've ever been through. There is nothing that I could say to make you feel different about that thing. And the part about society right now is sometimes we compare trauma. And I don't believe that's a correct thing or something that we're doing purposefully sometimes either. We all are going through different things, and I think people just need more support. Reach out to the people you care about, reach out to your family members. You never know who's struggling in certain areas, and I think that's where this pain and purpose come together, is when you look within yourself, there's areas that you would like to work on, there's areas that you don't like about yourself, and I think it's important to constantly try to check in and talk about those things. And this is somewhat I'm doing on this podcast, is kind of talking about some of the emotions and the feelings that I've had lately and trying to turn that into something good, into something positive. And I hope that it's coming across that way. Um, I don't like to pretend that I'm a psychiatrist or a doctor or a therapist, that I know what's right for people, but I do like to think that I know what's somewhat right for me. And what's right for me is to talk about things, and talking about my pain and the ways that I'm trying to process it and cope with it is important to me. And this outlet has become something that I truly value. And an episode like this may be overlooked by many, but for me, it's kind of like a turning point too, because I feel brave enough to sit behind the camera and behind the microphone and say that I'm not okay, but to know that I will be, to know that things do get better, to believe in the higher power guiding me through my pain, and that I'm going through this for a reason. I know that this is ultimately going to lead me to the things that I ultimately want as a person. I want certain things in my life, and I know that I have to go through certain things to get to those places. And sometimes those things are bad things. Sometimes those are things that we didn't expect or didn't wish for, but it's part of that growth process. It's part of what we truly want. And sometimes when we're manifesting things or praying for things, we don't understand that piece of it, is that God and the universe or whatever is going to put you through things to teach you certain lessons so that you're ready to receive what you asked for. And that's such a beautiful message that George Janko and Candace Owens were talking in that clip, is that you could be frustrated with God or the universe, and uh, you could be so angry and upset with with what's going on, but knowing there's a reason behind this. I asked for this in some roundabout way. Like, obviously you didn't ask for your pain verbatim, but you asked for a certain thing, and the universe listens. Everything's energy. If you ever listen to me on this podcast, I really am big about the energy of things and the energy of people and the energy of just life itself. And what we put out is what we receive. So if you're constantly putting out this negative self energy or this negative energy in general, what's going to come back to you? Negative things. So what we can try to do is try to put out a positive message, just try to put out healthy coping mechanisms, just try to put out healthy messages for people. And that's why I've always tried my best on this podcast to put out a message that's positive, that's helpful, that's encouraging, that talks to the average person. And I don't say that in a demeaning way. I say that in a way that we're not celebrities. None of us are celebrities, but we all have a powerful message that can help someone that we know. It's the butterfly effect, essentially, is constantly talking about different things with different people. You never know who you could help, who you can inspire. And I've been really big on community lately. And part of that early pain that I felt for this podcast and stuff that I felt throughout this journey of podcasting is helping me on my purpose and guide me to where I believe I need to go. And the conversations lately have been about community and faith and connection. And that's so beautiful, because those communities, when you nurture and care for them, it's an amazing thing, because they give back to you. Give back to where you're from. Give back to your family. Love your friends. These people around you are so, so important to getting you where you need to go. And you have to have trust and faith in those people and believe that they'll give that back to you. Obviously, you don't expect that. Not everyone is going to do and believe and say what you do. But I believe that if you try, you give that good energy forward, hopefully that person will reciprocate and send that back your way. Or the universe or God will send that back your way. You don't do it with the intention of receiving, you do it with the intention of being a good person. Pain has purpose. I'm going to keep reiterating that, because it's a powerful, powerful message. And it's kind of like a new mantra almost. If you've listened to my solo episode and shout to Mander's Mindset, I've been on that podcast twice. She always calls me out for the quotes, the stuff that I say, and maybe she'll listen to this episode and appreciate that shout out. But the one that was just sitting with me so long, that helped inspire some of my projects, was nothing changes if nothing changes. Well, to build off that, your pain has purpose. And you have to be the one to define it, essentially. You might not know it. Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it might be a later on thing. But if you're open to whatever comes your way, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And sorry, guys, I'm trying to also put up a stopwatch and timer to make sure that I don't go over the allowed time for my podcast. I like to keep it within under that 30 minutes. But regardless, I lost my train of thought with that. I'm so sorry, guys. But the overall message of this podcast, I'll just start wrapping it up because that's how you know I'm rambling probably for too long, is your pain has purpose. You might not know what that purpose is regarding that pain, but just like I mentioned in the beginning parts of this podcast with the clip from George Janko and Candace Owens, they were talking about when you're talking to God, when you're talking to the universe, and you're asking for certain things to happen in your life, to happen for you, you're going to be tested. You're going to be put through things that you're going to have to learn from in order to get where you need to get to. There's steps in the process that we need to understand, and it might put you through pain. It might make you suffer. You might feel very intense negative emotions about what you're going through. But I believe if you accept that, power through that pain has purpose. You decide if it has a purpose though. Because if you're going to sit with it and sulk with it and allow it to consume you, then it might not have the purpose that we think it does. But I believe with the right people, the right community, with whether it's faith or spirituality, with that belief of a higher power and the belief in yourself, that we can turn that pain into purpose. Pain's a huge, huge motivator and can help create beautiful, beautiful things if we allow that to happen. And I think with pain, it can create amazing things, like I just said, and push things forward. And I don't want to ramble on the same talking point with that, but I think that is an important message to kind of get out to people, to kind of state. And like I said, this is the solo episodes are always like a journaling session for me. It's just kind of like talk about my feelings, to talk about things. And I just want people to know, at least from this episode, that I'm gonna be okay. I'm working through some stuff that's going on in my life, and I'm very appreciative of the people that are closest to me right now and have been supportive uh, through things the last couple months. And I'm really excited about the next several guests that are coming on. I'm trying to bring back a lot of guests that never got a chance to be on camera through the podcast. And I think I have some really great guests in the pursuit of episode 200 towards the end of the year. And like I keep mentioning, that special project, I'm very excited about that project. I can't wait to show you guys. I'm getting closer and closer every month. And I think it's going to be a really great thing to kind of share with you guys. And I might do a solo episode about that project at some point when it's released. I do have some great collaborations coming up as well. Expect to see me on some podcasts and maybe some collab merch coming your way. A lot of great things that are coming this year. I've tried to take my networking level up and continue to push the podcast forward, because you never know what this could become, but allowing it to be what it is, a place for mental health, a place for people to talk about themselves and talk about their life and what they've gone through, in the hopes that someone else can relate, and also to be seen and heard. I think that's super important for the platform and what I'm trying to push as a positive message. So if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. And like I always say, if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. And I think I skipped the YouTube part, but if you want to watch the podcast, go on YouTube, search Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection. And I would really appreciate that. Seriously, also the subscriber thing. I really want to hit 100 subscribers. Can you please, please, please hit the subscribe button? It would mean the world to me. I'm really trying to be better at that this year. Hopefully I could hit 100 by the end of the year. But like I said, I really appreciate that. So, till next time, guys. Peace.